Hi boys and girls. This is a presentation that will discuss how argumentative writing is different from persuasive writing. Right now, this is probably a very hot topic in that you may be facing an argumentative piece or you may be facing a persuasive piece. So my purpose today is to explain to you how they differ. All right, so what you're looking at right now is a Venn diagram that is showing you some buzzwords for persuasive and for argumentative. So if you take a look at the persuasive side, it is showing you the very specific characteristics of a persuasive writing piece, and you can see that it's definitely very personal, it's emotional, it's one-sided, and it's subjective because it's obviously based on what the person believes. And of course you're encouraged to use the word personal pronoun I. But on the argumentative side, you'll notice that there are words such as balance, debate, reasonable, objective, counterclaims. That means you have to also discuss the opposing view on the topic, or the reason rather, that you believe such and such to be true. However, they do share some commonalities, as you can see in the middle. They both have an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, conclusion, transition, strong diction, examples and details, and it's extremely logical. Moving on, I think one of the most important topics, or actually not a topic but an attitude, is that when you have completed your brainstorming, choose the side for which you have the best ideas for. Often I will have students that say, well, I really don't like having school uniforms, so I'm going to choose for the side that says that we don't have to wear uniforms. However, they had a much stronger argument for the side that does support having school uniforms. So you want to be very careful when you select a particular side. You always want to choose the side that you have ideas, that they are generated, that you can brainstorm, you have something to say. And sometimes you don't realize it as much as when you begin to actually write. So in the next slide, what you're going to be seeing is another tip. As you begin to write, as I think anybody experiences when you have this pressure on you, as you write, more and more ideas will come to you. You will start to build up some steam. And so what I want you to be able to do is go ahead and start to develop the points in your thesis statement, which I will be talking about later on. But as you find that maybe you have a better reason, go with it. Perhaps in one of your body paragraphs, you came up with a stronger idea than what was actually in your thesis or in your brainstorming. A good idea is to go back and erase that reason and have it match the development or the point you were trying to make in one of the body paragraphs. So you are never locked into the paper until you put your pencil down. That time and that writing piece is yours. You can move around as much as you wish. The next slide is showing you a little bit more specifically things that make a persuasive and an argumentative. For one thing, you'll notice in the persuasive side of the Venn diagram, it does not have what is called a counterclaim. In other words, you might be saying that I support having school uniforms for these 3 reasons, and then you end it there. As the argumentative side would say, school uniforms are supported for various reasons, but then you would also add a sentence that says, however, others in the community have a different opinion on having students wear school uniforms. That is the beginning of a counterclaim. You're not specific, but it does exist. They share a lead, background sentence, thesis, and 3 logical reasons. The next Venn diagram focuses on the body paragraphs and what they include. Again, the persuasive is very emotional. There's a real strong appeal. And I would strongly recommend that you use these words: imperative, essential, critical. one per body paragraph. And that you keep in mind maybe on an opposing side that you can put those ideas in what is called a rebuttal paragraph, but that's completely optional because persuasive is really showing you one side. As the argumentative side, those body paragraphs must include some counterclaim to what you're actually saying. So in other words, you're actually going to argue against yourself just to present the other side, but still continue to work to prove your point is the correct way. And of course, again, what they share. The next Venn diagram is showing you transitional words, very effective words that I strongly recommend that both persuasive and argumentative use. In the middle of the Venn diagram, you have your typical beginning word, your transition word for each body paragraph. It could be first, second, third, next, meanwhile, equally important, additionally, and so on and so forth. But I think the most important part of this slide is what you see on the argumentative side. They are highlighted in green because that's a great way to start the counterclaim. It's a great little contrast word that allows you to bring in the opposite view, the opposite claim, what somebody else would say if they didn't agree with you. And so, once again, you're urged to use these words to introduce your counterclaim. Evidence and justification. You know, when we first started teaching persuasive writing, it used to be that we could make up, or you could make up, anything you wanted, and that was fair game. You could create facts out of the sky. You could say things that were completely not true. Not so anymore. The evidence that you use must be factual, but it can come from the news, television, movies, science, social studies classes. I would strongly suggest that you begin to read the New York Times. It is filled with wonderful articles that will bolster your background knowledge, that you can pull these ideas when you least expect it. So be very selective when you present factual information. You can't do research on this timed test. It's got to be information that you are well aware of. The next slide is going to focus a little bit more closely on your counterclaims. You're always going to begin with a transition that contrasts. You want to be brief, but you want to argue against or counter the reason that was presented in the thesis statement. Yes, again, this means that you are arguing against yourself for at least a bit, but then return back to your stance. These counterclaims must be frequent in order to present what's called a balanced argument. So thoroughly go ahead and present what you want to say, but the last sentence, bring in that counterclaim. But if it works out better for you, bring it in the middle of the paragraph. You are explaining both sides, but you're still trying to convince the position that you indicated in your thesis statement. Lastly is a slide for this section 1 that I'm giving you information on. It would be your conclusion. You don't want the conclusion to simply be, finally, this is why you should X, Y, and Z. You don't want to do that. You really want to develop 4 solid sentences. You can start with finally and summary, as one can see, indeed. And give a strong, lasting thought. Try not to repeat the thesis statement verbatim, word by word. Just, you can repeat some of it, but use different expressions, different words. You can even bring in another point that wasn't even touched upon in the actual paper. You want to end with a very strongly worded sentence. And one way that I suggest that you do that is sometimes is using something that would be a quote, a very famous quote at that, or another quote that you create. So that's it for the first part of persuasive versus argument.